Hey guys, today I want to show you guys the technical interview framework for software engineer that helped me land a 150K jobs. I'm not trying to brag or anything. Instead, I would like to help you to be more strategic, more confident, and land your dream job by sharing this strategy that everyone can master it with practice. So let's get started. In the beginning, I want to give a big shout out to the Codepath. I learned this framework from their interview prep course. It's an invaluable resource and a very supportive community. I learned a lot from their career coach and find many folks that share the same goal with me. I will link their website down below. Please feel free to check it out. So the framework is called Umpire. Each letter maps to a certain steps you should do during the interview. They are understanding, match, planning, implementing, review, and evaluation. So before we dive into details for each step, let's think about why we want an interview framework. There are at least 3 huge benefits. Number 1, confident. By having a framework, you have a guideline and SOP in your hand, which minimize the risks that you don't know where to start or your brain becomes empty because you're nervous. Trust me, I used to be a victim of this case before I know this framework. My interviewer and I stuck in the awkward silence for like 5 minutes. That's definitely not the situation you want to be in. Number 2, this framework can help you to solve the problem. In the following video, I will explain how this framework breaks down a complicated question into more approachable sections and make your logic and thinking flow clear. Number 3, by following this framework, it helps you to keep the information flow fluent between you and your interviewer. Some folks think that as long as you solve the question and the solution is bug-free and you're good to go. That's not true. Your interviewer are actually looking for a potential colleague that is easy to cooperate with during the real-life work. Communicate is definitely a matrix she will evaluate during the interview process. We will use this question, number of island, as an example, and try to solve it with the Umpire strategy. As we can see, it's been asked by Amazon and Google. I personally met this question before as well when I interviewed with Intuit. Okay, I encourage you to pause the video for a sec to read through the question and we will jump into the actual framework. All right, welcome back. So the first step is understanding. This is the step for you to first ask clarifying questions. This step is super important. The interviewer will usually give you the question as it is without any constraints being specified. They actually expect you to ask these clarifying questions, and you guys can have a clear agreement on what our constraints for this problem is. So pro tips. You can usually find those constraints in the legal question constraints section, usually on the bottom part of the question. That's a good starting point for you to think about some clarifying questions. So for these questions, some of potential clarifying question could be, what's the range of M and N, also known as the dimension of the input matrix? Can the island map has any value other than 0 or 1? So, second step of understanding is to try small example on a small input. This is the step that help you make sure you fully understand the question and let the interview know you are on the right track. It will be super painful if you need to redo everything after 20 minutes gone in a 15 minutes technical interview. LeetCode will usually provide some example with expected output. You could come up with some similar examples during your interview process and draw out the expected output just like in a diagram. So second step, match. So for this step, you first need to identify the type of the question. You will figure out this quickly for most of questions, whether it is a linked list or binary tree question, etc. The second step is to think about the question solving strategies. It could be sliding window, graph search, or using a stack. Please make sure you check in with your interviewer about your strategy. This is important because you always want to make sure you are on the right track. For this question, we can clearly see it is a graph problem, and we want to use some explore function, either DFS or BFS, to search for the coverage of an island. Third step, planning. I would say after you finish this step, you are 80% down of your interview. This is because your interviewer already know you fully understand the questions and have a reliable skeleton to implement the actual code. So what exactly should we do for planning? Basically, we use the plain English to plan out your algorithm. This helps you to plan out clearly by focusing on the algorithm without worrying about the actual implementation. For the number of islands problem, it can be concluded into 3 bullet points in English. First, iterate through each grid of input. Second, if the grid is a land, we need to increment the number of islands by 1 and also do explore starting from this point. Third, while we're doing the explore, flip the visited land into water to avoid double counting. Step 4, implementing. We finally reach the point that we start to write some code. As we can see, there are lots of preparation work you need to do before you actually dive into code. This decoupling helps us to avoid getting stuck or thinking too much about code syntax. Based on our framework here, this part is fairly straightforward. We just need to translate the planning from the previous stage into the programming language. Since this is not a legal problem-solving video, I will not deep dive into the actual implementation, but as you guys can see that if we have the blueprint in the planning stage, maps those plans into actual code is way much easier compared with the case that you just implement the code directly. Step 5, review. This is an optional state. Depends on how many time you left for your interview or whether your interviewer asks for actual runnable code. If you still have enough time, I highly recommend you to do this step. So in this step, you double check your code and walk it through with your interviewer. There are 2 main benefits. The first is that it can help you to detect potential typos or bugs. If your interviewer is asking for runnable code, it will be a little embarrassed if you have a runtime error due to an obvious typo or bug. Second, this walkthrough process helps your interviewer to refresh their memory about your solution. Again, this helps you to demonstrate a good communication skill and leave a good impression. So lastly, evaluation. During this step, the interviewer will usually ask you 2 questions. What's the runtime complexity and splice complexity of your algorithm? These questions test your analysis skill and evaluate whether your algorithm is efficient. Here's a table that shows you some common runtime you can expect it. O log n, usually related to binary search type of questions. ON, aka linear algorithm, is the case that you visited our input exactly once. For number of island questions, since we visit all land or water exactly once, so that algorithm will map to this ON case. O and log n is usually the runtime if we want to solve some tricky question in a smart way, usually related to sorting algorithm. O n square and beyond are usually considered inefficient, or we call it brute force algorithm. In this case, we want to test all possible combination, but sometimes it's unnecessary. So lastly, I want to say that practice makes perfect. I feel you guys, it is very painful in the beginning, especially for your first 50 lead code questions. But trust me, after you cross that threshold, it will be way much better, and you will feel the benefits of compounding problem-solving knowledge. Thank you so much for watching till this point. If you find this video helpful for your technical interview prep, please help me to smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. I will see you in the next one. Peace.